I'm Nina Gardner. I'll be moderator of extraordinary people here. It's a big panel. We have a lot of experience, and we're going to leave about 10 to 15 minutes for questions after, so please get your questions ready. But before we start, I wanted to sort of launch one of the core questions for this panel is the question of financial security and financial education for women. This is sort of the base, because you can't be asked to do investment if you don't have the base. And we found out that there is, according to the OECD, a significant gender gap on financial education, financial literacy for women. So I was going to ask Heather, who is a Dean of the Edinburgh School of Business and has written a number of books on how women must learn to manage their own money, not their husband's money, their own money, and make their own money and invest their own money. So I would take the first question. We'll go to Heather to talk to us. Give us some brass tack advice on your experience after having written 3-4 books or 9 books, you said.
I've written far too many books to be counting,
and never too many.
And by the way, but writing books as a big tip, whether you're a woman or a man, is not a way to make money. Okay. The thing, there are 3 reasons why I've always believed it's really important for women to be in charge of their own finances, and they are career-related reasons. Actually, they're not financial security reasons. The first is that if you know what your life costs, and if you know what is happening with your finances, you can make brave decisions about your career. So if you want to give up your highly paid job and go and work for the not-for-profit, or go and retrain, or come and study an MBA with me part-time or whatever, if you want to do that, you will know whether you can do it or not, because you will be in charge of your finances. The second reason is that when you get very senior jobs, whichever route you come, whether you come through marketing or HR or whatever route it is, risk, you name it, when you get to the top, you need to talk the language of the top. And the language of the top is all financial. So you have to be financially very well educated to get to the top. I sit as a public company director, as I know many of us do, on several companies, and it would be impossible to do that job and to discharge those obligations appropriately without knowing everything about what return on capital was, what return on equity was, etc. So it's really, really important to be financially literate. And then the final thing is, if you analyse, as I've done many times, the number of women in very senior jobs, they largely came up the finance route. Now that will change, but it is very important that the women who pioneered either came up through financial services, like many of my colleagues here, or came up through being a qualified finance director. So I don't do regret, actually. I don't do regret and I don't do guilt. But the only thing I regret in my life is that I didn't qualify as a chartered accountant. And then finally, there are 2 other things I would say. The first is that for cultural reasons, despite the fact that women drive most big purchases, there'll be a woman behind every decision about a car, every decision about a house, pretty well every decision about a big holiday, every decision about children's education. There will be a woman somewhere there in the decision. But despite that, women on the whole are, especially if they're in a relationship, are happier for the man to take charge. And if you remember one thing I say to you today, it is that a man is not a financial plan.
Okay, you've heard that, everyone. The man is not a financial plan. This is extremely important advice. Thank you, Heather. We might be getting back to you on these issues, but having just participated in an extraordinary conference in Milan from the Global Thinking Foundation that is really focusing on financial education for women, because in Italy there is a particularly bad gender gap on this. You have a lot of women who sort of let their husbands make the financial management decisions of the family finances, even though they may be extremely independent women. So please, ladies, think about that. I will pass to Sophia, who with Banque Paribas has a lot of power to effectuate change. You do, either financially in a philanthropic sense, or also in terms of managing and training. So if you could talk a little bit about the kind of training you do with your employees, but also externally, if you could.
Yeah, I think you hear me? Yes, it's okay. Yeah, I'm at BNP Paribas for the wealth management activity. So of course we need to give some training for our employees and for our clients too. So I will begin by our clients. Even they are high net worth individual, we know that the next generation sometimes just doesn't know exactly what financial means or what financial investment means. So we're here also to train the next generation, men and women, probably a lot of women, young women in there, and we do that sometimes just for the family or in kind of seminar. We have launched 3 seminars this year, one in Hong Kong, one in Paris, and one in San Francisco, just to bring those next generation to understand better what financial investment means. This is the first part. The second part, which is also very important, is to be sure that our people who are dealing with the clients are not having any bias in the way they will discuss on financial investment or on credits. Because on credit sometimes it's there that there are the more bias. So we're training our people to be sure they are not asking questions to the female clients that will be biased, because they think that a female should bring the guarantee of the husband, you see. So this is not possible. So we are really now, mainly in France, bringing this education, financial education, to be sure that the bias are not there.
Okay, so I was going to pass then, I'd like to talk about, you touched a little bit, Sophia, if I may, on the intergenerational wealth transfer, which was the topic of this big conference in Milan, and what that means. I mean, are the heirs, so the millennials plus the younger ones, are the heirs investing differently? Number one. So do they have a different mindset as to how they're going to make their money? And the other question is, do they understand that you can do well and do good? So that's a question that I'll ask the rest of you as well. But Jessica has done with Moxie Future an extraordinary, published a report on sort of the different investment interests of millennial, and then millennial women are even more different, I would say more advanced, more on that. So if you could talk, give us a few statistics on what you've prepared, because I think it's fascinating.
Okay, sure. So my angle is slightly different on this discussion. I'm focused specifically on the role that women can play as sustainable and responsible investors. And by that, we're talking about the environmental and social impacts, of really thinking about beyond just financial returns. And it's very much my hypothesis that women are highly motivated to think beyond financial returns, but we're seeing a disconnect in the financial market because we know that women don't feel served, they don't feel connected. So Moxie Future, we undertook some research specifically to talk to women, and we covered 5 markets, being China, Australia, the UK, Germany, and the US, and the stats were really exciting. 83% of women surveyed do care about where their money is invested, and 69% feel a sense of urgency to invest responsibly. So with all this huge motivation, what's the problem? What's going on? And we really found 3 key issues. Firstly, there's an issue around trust. A lot of women do not feel comfortable going to financial advisors or their financial institutions. Now, that's a very complex discussion, but there is a sense of a lack of trust in connecting with the people that are giving advice. The second piece is around confidence. While women are highly motivated, they are concerned that they don't have the skills, the understanding, the education to make these decisions. And then the third piece is a lack of time, which I think is something that we all grapple with. So really understanding these barriers, I think, is critical. So this discussion around financial inclusion, how do we get more women to come in, to invest, to be active investors and actually invest in the kind of world that they want to build? And I think we need to go back to the heart of what motivates women. And women do care about impact.
That's fantastic. I think, yes, it's investing, making sure that the money that you're investing your values, and you want your investments to reflect your values. It's that. Before we move to Catherine, I wanted to ask Heather a question about the time element, because we discussed that in the green room. Women need to allocate time. If you could, you did a whole television program about these kind of issues. What is your advice to the women in this room here about the time element?
is I presented a television program for 3 years on how to live frugally, which when the Women's Forum put you in a hotel right next door to Hermes and Chanel, it's quite difficult. What I would say, though, is that, what the previous two speakers have said to everybody, which is that women are very, very interested in what happens to their money, but lack either the confidence or the knowledge. And you don't get confidence or knowledge without investing time. Now, we all have 168 hours in the week. That includes sleeping, by the way. And I don't know about you, but I allocate my time on a return on capital employed basis. So if you think of your 168 as your personal capital, 1 hour a week is what I think it takes to become financially educated. And I think if you might start off with that hour a week, not renewing your car insurance on an automatic basis and finding a better one, which might be the really, starter level way of investing in financial knowledge. But ultimately, you will start to look at your pension fund returns and get your pension fund statement out and start to think about it. And then maybe start to take the big decision about whether you're going to invest some of that money yourself, and if so, how are you going to do it? But I think that it won't happen if you don't invest the time. And I think 52 hours a year, or maybe 2 hours off at Christmas, 50 hours a year is a really good benchmark.
Okay, we're getting practical. Catherine, so picking up on what Jessica was saying in terms of what she's seeing as trends and the idea that, actually, I think at this point it's not an idea, but thanks to the research, it's a fact. Women like to care more. Millennials care more about investing in their values and sustainability and issues around poverty alleviation, human rights, all those kind of environmental, social, and governance metrics and ideas, and companies that reflect those values. But at the end of the day, how do you harness what Jessica was saying? How are you harness that interest into the kind of products that a bank would be able to use, and how are you working with there's our high net worth women and families in the Gulf, correct, or Middle East, that you are working with?
So thank you very much.
Easy questions.
Yeah, really easy questions. So I think that so my take would be as follows. So I've been an investor in markets now for nearly 30 years, but I think my whole attitude changed to this space when I actually had children. And I started to think a lot about the legacy that I wanted to leave for them and that we as a family really cared about. And the way I think about investing is really with two lenses. It's firstly women as investors ourselves, and then it's women who actually think really long and hard about creating both investment products that are suitable for and supporting women as a whole. And just maybe a couple of very brief statistics. So in the UK at the moment today, only 7% of fund managers are female, which is a staggeringly small percentage. So part of our responsibility for those of us who can do anything about it is to encourage more women into the sector and to have internships and practical advice so it is an appealing option. And the reality is that why does it matter? So I've always worked in mixed gender teams from an investment perspective. The statistics show, without a doubt, whether you look over 12 months or 10 years, mixed gender teams give you better investment results. And I think the other point to make is that when you look back at the global financial crisis in 2008, female-led funds did better because women tend to take less risk. I mean, we know that. We just talked about the fact that we're sometimes a bit less confident with our own money. Sometimes it plays out through the investment side as well. So from a practical perspective, the conversations we're having with our clients in the Middle East is that they feel there's a burning need for finance as a force for good. So it's not to say that you're going to give up financial return, but it is very much thinking about what do women need? Is it access to financing? Is it products that really focus on more responsible factors? I've seen personally the benefit of gender balance in the boardroom. So at the moment we're thinking about lots of different ideas. But as I said, I think it's absolutely critical, and it slightly falls into the if not us, then who? And I think we have a responsibility.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Last but not least, I won't consider you the token man. We're actually very happy to have you, Bertrand. But you have had a long career in international financial institutions and have survived the World Bank. I don't know how.
Barely.
Barely. But in the couloir here, we actually had you had some very interesting things to say about sort of what your theory, having seen the lack of women in absolutely in your entire professional life in some of these in financial institutions. What have you noticed, and what are you doing about it with this new fund that you've launched?
Yeah, I think it's a fascinating. I've been in finance for 25 years, and it took me a while to get to the conclusion that finance is gender biased completely from the bottom of the pyramid, access to finance, to the top at the regulatory and board level, at every level, and it's bad. So it took me a while to get there, but I'm there now. So,
Welcome.
no, but I think it's important to. And now what we are facing is we have to play at two levels, and that's what I'm trying to do given my background, what I'm doing today. We have to play at a practical level, and that's what I'm doing with my fund, but I don't overestimate my capacity. With hundreds of millions, you can do certain things, you cannot change the world, but it's important as a signal. But you also have to work at the systemic level, and that's very important. We cannot ignore that, and that's where I'm the most frustrated, because we had a terrible crisis. And I'm afraid we have wasted that crisis to address these issues. Basically, we have consolidated the past system, but we have not started to think a new system where I think gender would play a critical role. Not only gender, there are a number of issues that need to be addressed, but in particular that one. And so we have to play both holistically and push, our leaders, private sector, public sector, civil society, to really push this through the agenda, because it's not just, again, as people say, it's more and more documented. It's not just the right thing, it's a good thing to do. It's not just a slogan, I think it's very real. So I want to focus on access to finance in emerging and developing economies, which is where I'm spending my time now. And I think there are 6 things I'd like to highlight very briefly, and happy to take questions after. First of all, I think we have to leverage the digital revolution much more than we've done so far. I think it's extremely important. It provides a different access to people. And sometimes it's easier for a woman to type with a phone than to go to a branch where she's welcomed by a guy and she's not totally at ease to speak with a guy, etc.
Yeah.
So this type of things. So I think it's very important to leverage the digital things. We have also to address all discrimination. Certain are very straightforward. Basically, a woman cannot act without her husband. Fortunately, legally speaking, I think there are 3 countries left on Earth where it is still the case. But still, 3 is too much. I think it's RDC and some others. But you have some more subtle things. How do you get a passport in certain countries? How do you get an ID, etc.? So for the KYC, for instance, in banking, it's sometimes extremely difficult. So if you don't address these very things which are at the border of legal and cultural issues, I think it's important. So really focus on discrimination. Create adapted products. I think it's very important. Don't think for you, think for the clients. What do the person need in terms of insurance, saving products, etc. Fourth, recognize that there are differences between countries. It's not one size fits all. We're mentioning RDC in Morocco, Pakistan, Bolivia are very different cases. And we have to address that. It's not a kind of Western, one size fits all approach. You have to customize things. 5, I think we have to be honest vis-à-vis the data. We have to, I know it's not politically correct, in particular in this country where you are not supposed to do this type of things, but you have to disaggregate it data by gender. To really understand what you've been doing by polls, etc., we should be able to know what does it make as a difference. And the 6th point is really the framework, the financial framework. How do you define creditworthiness? How do you access collateral? I mean, a lot of women are farmers, but they don't own the land. So how do you get a credit if they don't own the land as a collateral, for instance? Can you organize branches where women are welcomed by women? No, this type of very basic things. So I think we have to play on all these things and make sure that, again, not everybody is capable of agitating the G7 or the G20. Some are, so we have to do that. But the others, everybody here around this table can really do things and make sure you have a gender lens in everything you do financially. So that's what I'm trying to do with my investment fund. But everybody can do something at every level. And I think it's not up to them, it's up to us.
Excellent, thank you. How many women in your team?
So we are 10 and we have 2, 3, 4. So
4.
it's almost balanced.
Getting there. Okay, so start thinking about your questions, and I'm going to ask our wonderful panelists here to think about the kind of commitment they would like to make for next year and just as we go forward on this very issue. There are lots of different ways we can tackle the financial security, education, and impact space. But I'll start with Heather again. By the way, the best question gets a copy of her book. Can you wave it here?
My financial advice for independent women. This is not a book plug. You ask the best question, you get it for free.
You get it for free. It also matches her shoes. I don't want to say this, but it really is extraordinary. Fantastic. Okay, so Heather, your commitment as we go forward. I know you're already working on a lot of this, but
I would like a call to action for everybody to spend an hour a week on their finances or helping somebody else to understand theirs.
that's very concrete. I really hope you all do that because I have to admit I don't do that myself, and I should.
Well, Bertrand just mentioned how difficult it is for some people to get credit ranked and access to finance. How many of you, put your hand up if you know what your credit rating is? Okay, the rest of you, go home tonight and find out what it is. Because that's the kind of thing you could spend an hour usefully doing. There's bound to be at least 2 mistakes on your credit assessment that you need to put right. And that takes time.
All right, Catherine.
So following on from my earlier remarks, our commitment is, and I have 6 witnesses from our organisation who are going to help me do this. Our commitment is that we will design some investment products over the next year with a very specific gender lens bias to them.
Fantastic. Have you started, or do you have something in mind
Oh,
yet?
yes. We have started, haven't we? Yes. Safety and
okay.
numbers. Yes.
Good. You've brought some of your team here to make sure that
We
it
have
happens.
6. Yes.
6. All women?
Yes.
All right. Fantastic. Great. Tom.
So I will try to be consistent with what I've said. So given my background, I have the privilege to have access to the global stage to a certain extent. So I will continue to push that agenda as much as I can. I wrote a book as well called Can Finance Save the World? And it's not a science fiction book. I think finance can make a difference. I'm not as optimistic as I was when I started writing it, but I really want to push that gender lens throughout every conversation I'm having on finance. And on the other hand, more practically, in my investment fund, we make sure that every investment decisions, we take the gender lens in perspective. That's absolutely
That's
critical.
actually very important because impacts, the human rights impacts and stakeholder engagement. Maybe the next book should be, co-authored with a woman, is Will Women Save Sustainable Investing?
Women save finance?
Women are cleaning up after everything, so women will just have to take on finance as well. Sorry about that. Okay, so Sophia.
So I will continue to really foster what women entrepreneurs are doing because, women entrepreneurs, as you said before, they are not having the same access to private equity fund or to credit. So this is the way we're training them at Stanford. So we have already made 150 women go for 1 week session at Stanford each year. So we'll do it again next year. Why? Because we train them. They come from 15 countries. They have a network. So bringing the training, having a network, making business between themselves, having role models, knowing that they could do something more. We have already 3 women from our alumni that have gone from Europe to the US to create new business, so they dare to do it. And we think that as a bank, we could of course make finance, but we could do more than that. We could go beyond that and make it our network footprint be something that will help our clients having a new network that they wouldn't have before. So we would continue to do that, and I think that really I'm proud that those women could do more than before by just coming to this program.
That's extraordinary. How many years you've been doing the training?
4 years now, 4 years.
Every year 150?
No, 40 every year from 15 countries. So now we have 4 years of background, so 150 women from 15 countries. And we gather them each year in a town. So this year we did that in Paris. Next year we do that in New York. And that's great. And that creates a real feeling of networking and daring to do something and sharing practices, sharing what others are doing. And I think that sharing practices very practically is something that is critical.
And we're very good. I think if any of you if this is your first time at the Women's Forum, you're sharing experiences, sharing practice. We're really good at networking when we have a chance and we spend some time on it. we're, you know, the women are the biggest users of the telephone and in the old days, Facebook and all the social media, just because we're more social in general. And so I think we should use it for good. Jessica, last
Okay.
but not least.
So my commitment and then my call to you is just don't believe the hype. We keep on being told by advisors, by financial institutions that thinking about impact will result in lower financial returns, that it's not the thing to do, but we know it's not true. The data is there. It's very, very clear. And this is even taking out the long-term fiduciary duty discussion. So, you know, what I say to you is if in 2018 anyone's telling you not to invest in a company that doesn't pollute the world, that doesn't see gender diversity as a business value, that doesn't have processes in place to ensure that we don't have child labour. If somebody's telling you not to think about
Hire
that,
them.
then we've got the rules of the game fundamentally wrong. And it has to be us who changes that. So that's my call to action is use your voice, speak to your advisors, speak to your banks, make a noise about this because it really does matter and it has to come from us.
Thank you, Jessica. And on that point, there's a lot of data, I think it's from you, that shows that the heirs of the money, so the millennials and the generation Zs, Xs and Zs that are getting the money, are changing their financial advisors when they get the money because most of their financial advisors are not thinking in those terms. And look where it's gotten us, you know, invested in tobacco and oil and gas and sin stocks in general have been doing really well up until now.
Can
but
I
not
can I
anymore,
just
sure.
just throw in one other thing that I think that we have this misnomer that if we talk about women as investors, we're just talking about gender lens investing. Actually, no. Our research tells us that the top priorities for a lot of women: climate change, pollution, income inequality, and access to healthcare. So it's not just about finding gender lens opportunities. It's addressing these long-term sustainability issues, which is simply not going to go away.
Last point, and then we
Just
will,
because
we're
I think
opening up
it's
time.
extremely,
Please raise your hand.
what you say is extremely important. When I say we have wasted the crisis, I really mean it. We have not changed the fundamentals of finance and the system as it is working, be it the accounting, the reporting, the compensation, etc., is not incentivized in that direction. So you really have to push the system to get there. It will not naturally get there. And you cannot rely on the goodwill of BNP Paribas and others. It's okay, but it's definitely not enough. And if we don't change that, I'm afraid nothing will change. So you have to push.
Question. Okay. Wonderful. Ooh, 1 and 2. We'll take 2 questions, and then you all remember there's a book here to be won. Let's make this a ferocious competition.
Hello.
So those many of us.
Okay. Hi. Thank you very first of all for your time. My name is Anna. I work for Google Ireland, and my question is: I'm personally at a time in my life where I'm about to start making a lot of very important decisions. I'm getting married next year. We're moving to the U.S. And my fiance happens to be extremely savvy, and it happened during a conversation where I realized I don't know anything about this. I have no idea how to move my pension from Ireland to the US. I have no idea about mortgages, and we're thinking about buying a house. So I realized, oops, I'm not prepared for a lot of important decisions that will kind of shape my financial safety. And it really resonated with me when you said that a man is not a financial plan, because I'm very happy that I'm very independent, but in this case, I'm not intellectually independent. So if you have a very short time to prepare for these decisions, what do you think is the thing you must prioritize to learn?
I think this is a question for Heather.
In my experience, and this is a sweeping generalization, and I apologize immediately to all the men in the room, you know, I wouldn't marry anybody without knowing everything about their past, every woman they've dated. Okay. And you know, I mean, this is, you know, a public place. I'll be careful what I say here. But I do, you know, you heard Bertrand mention something called KYC. Some people in the audience may not know. That means know your customer, and it's the kind of thing you have to do before you take on a new client. Imagine what you should be doing when you're taking on a husband, okay? KYC doesn't even begin to start, all right? Yeah, and I would ask for full financial disclosure. And if if you know, on both sides, both of you put on the table, where's your pension? What are you earning? What savings have you got? What are your financial aspirations? Before I agreed to marry my husband, I asked him whether he's prepared to fund private education. There are only 7% of women in fund management. There are also only 7% of children in the United Kingdom in private education. I didn't know whether he objected to it on principle, and I wasn't prepared to marry him if he did. So I think you have to ask these hard questions about money before. That's what KYC or KYH.
This is, we'll get a question here. I just want to, one thing about this, the Global Thinking Foundation in Milan has also done some very interesting study, I hate to say it again, in Italy, on the link with domestic violence. And if you're not independently or financially secure and aware and making or helping in those financial decisions, you find yourself in a situation where your husband is managing the family wealth, and if you misbehave or you have a falling out, you can't actually afford to get divorced, and you put yourself at peril and your children at peril. So know your customer and know your husband. Okay, next.
Hi, I'm almost the opposite situation in terms of the man that I married. I'm in charge of all of our finances, and I wouldn't consider myself an expert. I've just had to learn. I've done all of our mortgages. I do all of our investing and do our budget. And I'm hungry to learn more. And I loosely committed to a bit of time each week, but I'm going to make it an hour. But I need more of a framework because it's not a lot of time. We've got 3 kids, and I need a plan for how I use that time super effectively so that I feel that I'm getting ahead. So I'm curious what you would recommend for a framework, if we wanted to map out what we could achieve in a year.
I'll give you a really quick answer because I'm sure everyone's
have to
got
give
it.
everyone a book.
But I will honestly. My assistant Natasha is standing at the front. Natasha, stand up so everyone can see what you look like. Okay, anybody who gives their business card to Natasha, I will post you one. There are enough people here. It's small enough. We're not astronauts. What I want to say was you have to divide your whole life into, I'd honestly say buy a notebook or start a spreadsheet. Every single page is a different thing. That your mortgage, your investments, your pension, your car insurance, your house insurance, every single part of your financial life needs a new page. And then literally every week go to it and say, right, what do I have to learn about this week? And where do I have to get behind it? You will get on top of all of this quite quickly. Then you will start asking the questions that the rest of the panel would like you to ask, which is how you will change the world. Which is where should I invest? What and how can I matter? So the first bit is about educating yourself about you. Then it's about educating yourself about how you're going to make an impact.
And Sophie?
I just wanted to say that as a bank, and we have relationship advisor that could help you also to find out some answer to your questions, because we are there for that also, because as you said, there are so many things to learn about. The thing is, what are really your priority, understanding who you are, what are your objectives. So probably when you discuss with your banker, he could just help you, he or she, I would say the person, okay? The person could help you just to define the priority that you have to dig in, and then to find out what will be the real answer that you are trying to find. So, because otherwise you have so many things that you should or have to work on that will be probably losing time.
And your appetite for risk, right? So when you're investing,
we can
that's a
go
whole
there.
other
And
issue.
appetite for risk, impact, whatever.
I was just going to make a brief additional comment, which is that I think in the past, when I'm in a very similar situation to you, and I remember the most patronizing conversations with people who thought they were giving me good advice. Walking in, I think, to the first ever IFA, independent financial advisor I met, he looked at me and he said, "Now, what do you know about investment?" And I was like, well, I've been a fund manager for 15 years. I'm running a top-rated investment trust. I don't know lots of stuff, but I'm learning. And so I actually think that there is a space, and I don't think I've ever seen, maybe Heather, you're brilliant, you probably have come across it, almost a sort of guide to debunking the ridiculous jargon that some of these unfortunately male advisors use. And I think the other point I would make is be very clear about your values. Again, they're very individual. How you invest, what you want to invest in, it's a very personal decision. But you need to work out, as Heather said, you need to do the pages, you need to work out how you get the framework, but then be really true to your values, because nothing makes you happier when you feel that even a small amount of money is making a big difference.
Other questions? Mary? And then there's another one. No. Yes. Okay. I wasn't sure whether it was hair or.
I have a very different type of question. So, you talked about the institutional shifts that need to be made and the systemic shifts that need to be made in our markets and our systems. But if we look at a lot of emerging markets, the way that their financial systems are being built is completely different. And so my question is, I'm so interested to see and hear what this is. So my question is, what can we learn from how their structures are coming up? Because I think of certain Asiatic countries that are actually developing in such a way that gender is not as big of an issue because there's no institution that they're going to. They're doing it through their mobile devices. They're doing it through like their phones. And so gender doesn't play as much of a role. So I know it's a very different kind of question, but like, what can we actually learn from other markets that don't have these like very deep-rooted institutions that need to be shifted?
It's interesting, the role of technology, which we didn't spend enough time. That's a whole other panel. I don't know, Bertrand, do you want to take that on?
Yeah, I think you're right and wrong. You're, if I may be blunt, you're right in the sense that you're right in the sense that technology, in particular, in a number of cases where mobile banking, in particular, has made a difference. But financial regulation is kind of global. I mean, the accounting systems are global, etc. I mean, the supervision of banks is global, etc. So it's not that different. So on the one hand, we have to learn from these tools. On the other hand, we still need to think globally on the financial rules and the financial system. And so you have to learn both ways. And you have to take into consideration, that's what I say, Morocco is not RDC, is not France, is not Bolivia. You have to take into consideration the local circumstances. And that's the difficulty of finance, which by definition is global. And money is fungible and circulates, etc. So how do you kind of combine this kind of global by construction with local by essence? And that's where the challenge is. And we have to learn both ways. And we have to pay attention not to impose our vision there. And it's not easy.
I would just add something because we are speaking on average wealth while people could invest things. But when you look at emerging markets, you have also the poorest people. And here I think that we could do a lot, what we try at BNP Paribas to do by microfinance. And when you look at microfinance, what do you think? What do you see? You see that the most borrowers are women. If you look at Southeast Asia, which is the biggest market for microfinance, last year 92% of the borrowers were women, which means that the impact is huge because if you give some money to women, they will then educate the children, and the children will be having no bias in terms of gender diversity. So it's key to be sure that at all levels of the family, you could bring this education on how to bring business and how to bring education to your children and then make the gender diversity no more an issue.
Jessica.
Really, really quickly. I've just spent the last 12 years living and working in Asia in green finance and responsible investment. And I think to Bertrand's point, it's the financial market regulators are structured and moving very differently, and we're seeing so many more women within the regulators, and I think this is really informing. So if you look at China, for example, they're coming up with their own standards on green finance, they're coming up with their own way of thinking, and I totally agree with you, we need to share that, but also recognizing financial regulation in a lot of these emerging markets is fundamentally different to what we've inherited, certainly in the West.
And you also, your report brings out that actually Chinese women are really, really concerned about the environment, maybe less on the human rights dimension, but environment because of the air pollution problems that they are experiencing seems to be high on their investment agenda. Last question.
Sure.
No?
Okay, last question.
You're passing?
How?
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other question? Yes.
Yes, right
sorry.
here. How do you see digital and cryptocurrency impacting this conversation going forward?
I can't hear. Can you say it?
Oh, yeah. How do you see digital and cryptocurrency affecting this conversation going forward?
Digital and cryptocurrency. So that is a big question. How do you all see that impacting this space? Digital and cryptocurrencies. Haha. That's a tough one.
It's really challenging.
Yeah. I think that was.
I would say that, as you said, that digital will bring education to everyone with no bias. I would say that cryptocurrency is something else. So I would distinguish both things. So I would say, okay, for digital, cryptocurrency, we know what it is.
Well, I'm not sure we know what it is actually. It's one of the few topics where I've spent a lot of time and I've not been able to reach any conclusion. Or actually, I'm changing conclusions every day, which is a different story. So if I can leave you with a malicious answer, which I borrow from somebody else, he told me, cryptocurrency are to blockchain was a X-rated website was to internet. You have to start with pornography to kickstart this whole thing. I know whether it makes sense. So crypto is something really I don't know. Sometimes I say it's changing this whole thing. And what is interesting is that it was created 15 days after Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. Interesting, we are celebrating the 10th anniversary. It's no coincidence. It's just because currency now is floating. That's a big decision made 50 years ago. Everything is floating. And with the crisis, the central banks have increased injection of liquidity. So we don't really know. When I ask you what is a dollar, you will say it's X euro. And what is a euro, it's X dollar. So everything is like this. So it's very interesting, not per se, but because of the questions it's raising to the system. And we have not addressed them, as I said.
Well, I would say, since you brought up the 10th anniversary, this has been said 1,000 times for those of you who have been at the Women's Forum over the years, but if it had Lehman Brothers had been Lehman Brothers and sisters, we might not have had the financial crisis. So I hope that all of you make a commitment to yourselves to spend at least an hour a week on your finances. Okay, to the first question. You're going to award to the first question. And whoever wants this book can you stand up and get business cards? Thank you very much. And start looking at your finances. It's not only spending time on it, but looking at how, if you can afford it, to actually start investing toward more sustainable finance products, funds, ones that have women running the companies, or more toward looking at impacts toward women and human rights and poverty alleviation and, of course, sustainability, climate change. So think about that. So that's where you can really make an impact. Thank you very much for hanging in there. And yes, we were able to do it even though we had the astronauts across the way.